Good evening. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting in Beaumont this evening on May 21st at 5:01. We will call the meeting to order, and I will begin with a land acknowledgement. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all First Peoples of this land, whether they be First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich vibrant communities across the land. As we gather here in Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis Nation, we acknowledge that we are all treaty people and have ongoing responsibilities to protect and honor the treaty, the inherent rights of the people, and the land. All right, we will move on to the adoption of the agenda. Any additions to the agenda, Madam Clerk? Or changes?
There are no additions to the agenda tonight.
Thank you. Would a council committee member like to move? Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the May 21st, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be adopted as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussions? No. Please vote. That passes unanimously. And we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes for the Committee of the Whole, April 16th, 2024. Would anyone like to move the adoption of the minutes? Councillor Penrod.
Thanks, Chair. I'll move that the April 16th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Any discussion? Nope. Okay, please vote. Thank you, and that passes unanimously. And Madam Clerk, any open forum? It's not.
There are no open forum tonight.
Nope. Thank you. And we'll move on to our presentations. So beginning with 5.1, Commemorative Giving Program Update by Mr. Suter.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Paul Suter, Director of Community Services, here this evening for a brief update on some of the work that the administration has been doing on Commemorative Giving Program. This is sort of in tandem with the council and naming policy work that we've been working on, and we weren't quite prepared with this report for the end of Q1, so I'm here this evening just to give an update. Also seeking committee feedback and some general comments that might help us as we kind of nail this down throughout the rest of 24. So I do have a brief PowerPoint that we'll run through. See if I can control it here. There we go. So we do not currently have an official program or policy in place for individuals that want to leave a legacy for a loved one or have a milestone for a special occasion or something along those natures. In the last number of years, we've had a couple of ad hoc requests that have come in for memorial benches. And without a process or a program in place, we have managed those just sort of on the one-off, and it's been quite problematic to do so in that format. So a couple things. There's some lessons learned during the installation, the purchasing installation of those two benches that we've done, as well as how do we better advertise this for the residents if it's something they're interested in, as well as streamline the process for administration to both order it, have them pick what they want, and then location to put it. So the two ad hoc ones that were done in the past, the residents were choosing the location, which again was somewhat problematic because it wasn't in line with what Parks has been trying to do with the bench program. So as they look for new furniture along the trailways and whatnot. So the need for a program to be in place, I think, is evident just by dealing through those two situations. Lost my place here, sorry. Yeah, so a lot of communities have this sort of thing in place. It provides clarity, transparency on how it works and how you would access that service. Did I move it here? Oh. That's an example of what we're talking about. So you would have a bench, you would have a plaque that would be part of the bench. That one looks like it's actually affixed to the face of it. Some of the benches you can get now, they have a recess where it sort of sits in so that it's flush with the back, so it's not protruding into your back. This was just an illustration of what we could do or what it could look like. Our benches that we have currently in place are a variety of makeup of wood, composite. There's a variety of things in place throughout the city. Going forward, Parks is working on what are our options? What are the best options for residents that are interested in participating in this kind of program, what they would select, and then also as part of that, which option they would like and where it could go. So Parks is working for the rest of 24 on identifying benches that we have currently that are needing to be replaced, as well as high priority areas along pathways, which we have known through resident feedback are in need of a bench. We do have 42 kilometers roughly of trailways. We do have 155 or so benches in place currently. And if you average that out, you're talking 270 meters apart on average. However, that's not a reality because some of them are doubled up, whether it be in a parks, in playground areas. So it's not a true every 270 meters you're going to see a bench. So some of that feedback has been heard through the last number of years about new locations. So what this would do is would help us control where they go, because we don't want to be letting everyone decide where to put a bench, for example, because that's problematic for access. It's problematic for then maintenance of that area. So Parks is working for the rest of 24 and identifying the ones that need to be replaced, and we would look to replace those first, as well as then from there, where would be the priorities to put new benches in. Now, these are not cheap because it's not just a bench. You're talking about a concrete pad that would be required to affix the bench to. That would have to be flush for ease of maintenance. So you can mow right to the edge of the concrete. You're not having to then have someone come back and weed whip around there. You'd want to just do it one pass. So there's a few things that go into that. We don't have a firm price yet as to what that package looks like, but it's anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 to $6,000, including the bench, the concrete pad, and installation. So it's not a cheap thing. And administration is looking to go forward in the renewal program for Parks furniture of an annual ask that Parks would have. Right now, they're proposing $50,000 for 25, but that doesn't get you too far. If you think about that, if it's a $5,000 average for a package, that's only 10 benches throughout the city. So when you look at 155, as we go through replacing them, it's expensive. So it's then even harder to implement, purchase and install new benches where we know people want them. This program opens up, the goodwill, I suppose, of offering this service to the residents. Not to mention, the potential would be to help offset some of these. If there's increased demand as the years go in, then we're offsetting some of the costs that we'd be planning to spend on these benches. So I think it's a win-win for the residents that are interested in participating, as well as a win-win for everybody at large if we can offset some of these costs to replace and install new benches. What that number looks like, we're thinking at the moment, until we flush out the actual package cost with a couple different options, depending on which benches people want, 50% cost recovery would still go a long way to mitigating some of these expenses. It's hard to predict what the demand will be. We've got about 3 people that we're aware of that are waiting for something like this. We've been kind of putting them on hold until we can establish a program and how that would work exactly. So that's the demand we're aware of right now. And I would imagine as it goes, it'll become more popular. So for 25, again, the work will be to examine which benches we need to replace and select future suitable locations, prepare the cost for packages, and include all of that in the 25 operational budget. Gives us time to have those suitable options, advertise accordingly, promote the program, have it an easy thing to complete online, hopefully, and people go through it that way. We would also make sure that any verbiage in this program would align with our council naming policy to make sure there's no conflicts there. with what we're talking about when you're naming things after people. Also allow for communication, starting, potentially starting for January 1. We also have to, I didn't include it in here, but we have to consider that when we're charging a fee for a service, we have to include that in the fees and charges bylaw for 25 and what that looks like. So some of those logistical details still need to be ironed out. My hope would be we come back to council as soon as those are done, give you a fully fleshed product, you know what you're getting into, and then the cost would be incurred in the 25 budget if that's what the direction is. Depending on the popularity and the uptake of this, if they're assuming there will be some, we could look to expand the program to potentially trees in the future, for example. But I think for now, the benches will probably be the most sought after at the moment. It also is something that we know is a need to expand that along our trails and our pathways. So administration's been focused around that. But I am curious to see if the committee has any feedback for us this evening, that we make sure we're on the right path with something that you would like to see before we do any more work and bring something fully fledged together. So it's a very brief update, but I appreciate your time and I'll be happy to take any feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this is something that's obviously would be beneficial in our community. It gives people the opportunity to commemorate their loved ones while also kind of giving something back to the community as well, which is nice and something that brings us together as a community. I am all lit up here with all sorts of questions, so I will start with those, and then I will move on to my questions if I have any left. So we'll start with Councillor Natellenboss and Councillor Penrod, then Mayor Daniluk.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question for yourself, Mr. Suter, just in regards, actually two of them here. One, I just want a little clarity around the vetting for naming. I know the council naming policy is being reviewed and being brought forward to us, but my understanding is that we weren't going to do a full overhaul. We were going to adjust it, but it was fairly restrictive in the ability to name something after someone. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be a separate section dedicated to the benches that would allow for a little more leeway, and then what that vetting process would look like.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, that's something we're making sure is in alignment with that naming policy for sure. We wouldn't want to have a conflict there. The actual details of that aren't fleshed out yet, so I really can't speak to that. But I do know that I don't know that we're seeing the same conversation here with those two. However, we want to make sure we're not conflicting. I mean, if you're naming something in memoriam or a milestone, there has to be some caution there, I suppose. But yeah, the details have not been fleshed out yet.
Perfect, thank you. And just one more question relating, I guess, to the maintenance side of things. Obviously, the benches themselves, I'd imagine that would be a city responsibility. But if there's any defacing of any of the names or anything like that, do you have any idea who that would land on, or what the process would be, or if we've thought about that?
Yeah, we've thought about even just the replacement alone. So if someone has selected a bench that they really like the one option, for example, it's not just about the plaque. They maybe just like that particular style of bench. So, we would look at a term if it's going to be replaced in 10 years. It depends which one they choose, what the life cycle and expected life cycle of that is, and then where does the cost come? Does it come back to the person that paid for it in the first place? Again, details still to be fleshed out. You could do it a variety of ways, to be honest. Typically the maintenance would fall on us. Defacing, we would typically deal with that as we would with any of our furniture. The main focus here is to allow residents to recognize something, a milestone or a person, as well as, help us offset some of the costs of the furniture as we move forward. So the detail, of course, the devil's in the details to some degree, but those are done in a variety of ways. It's not unlike what we do with any kind of advertising or sponsorship, any kind of branding that we do now. There's sort of a expected term on it, and then the family example could be asked if they want to renew that or not. If we're able to track them down, that's not always the case. There's obviously some challenges there as the years go by, but We would expect the maintenance and the ongoing cost would fall to administration or city, just as it would now with the benches that we own, so.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McCook. Mr. Suter, just wondered, I was glad to see that trees are projected to be included in this too eventually. Just wondering if you could share why the delay on that? Like, it seems to me that the policy, though we want to make sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed with regards to benches, is probably pretty straightforward. And with our urban forest plan in place, the trees piece could be pretty straightforward too. I imagine I know the answer to this, but I just wanted to start there. Why hold off on that piece?
Thank you for the question. I think when we looked at this, we wanted to get benches going because there's a lot more work in that than you would realize from the outside, just because identifying what needs to be replaced is the first step. Secondly, then if you're going to add additional beyond that, where is that going and how does that priority be determined?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want to compound this work, assuming there was uptake of adding the tree piece to it. The trees can, you know, I can't speak for parks and that overall, that's not my area per se. I think when speaking with them about this program initially, their focus for 24 and then into 25 was just to launch the program, get the benches going, see what the interest is, and then potentially expand that in the future. So I'm not sure that I answered your question, but I think there's just more work involved than we first realized from the outside.
Yeah, so it's a human resources issue, it sounds like. Just wondering if there's any other infrastructure that's sort of projected or considered to be included in this program, or is that something we start with benches and move to trees and then reassess from there?
Yeah, I think when it comes to infrastructure, I think the benches are and trees would be the first ones that come to mind for parks, outside spaces, open spaces, trailways, pathways. I think beyond that, you're looking at more of a naming rights component potentially, if you're talking about a playground structure, for example, or any kind of building or other kind of amenity, whether it's a gazebo or something. So we're not there yet. I mean, we've had nothing in place to deal with this, to be honest, and we've done these a couple ad hocs, and they were very problematic. We let we let the process dictate instead of us dictating how this should go for us to manage it. So we're trying to just get ahead of that as we go forward to provide the service, but also control it so that it works for us. Because then people's expectations are tempered from the beginning as to what they're getting into. We don't want to disappoint them. We want to set the rules right away. This is how it works. If you're interested, you join in. If you don't, that's fine. So.
Thank you. It just occurs to me that we just received a report, not that we're committed to it yet, but around a plan to light our walking paths and multi-use trails. And so that light infrastructure is something that might be pretty similar to benches and not as big as a playground or a pavilion. But you anticipated my next question, which was, I wonder if eventually if we can get a cenotaph built, where that would fall, if it would fall under this program or probably more likely, given your answer, under the council naming policy.
That's a great question. The cenotaph. That's been discussed many times, I think, over the years. That would be, to me, that's a capital project. And there's a few layers to that. Where would it go is obviously the first question. And cenotaphs are not cheap if you're going to do that properly. I mean, they're quite expensive. I mean, I think we looked at some different options years ago and it was $75,000 5 years ago. I think if we looked at something even, you know, not grandiose, just something sort of what you would think of when you think middle of the road sort of thing. And I would imagine the costs have escalated. And that's even part of this challenge is the concrete costs on these sort of things keep going up. So I can't even say that the price is fixed right now. So that's why we're still kind of getting closer to budget time. We'll have a better idea what that could be for next year. But the cenotaph, that wouldn't fall here. That would be a kind of a one-time capital project with siting and what that looks like that would go forward. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll go with the mayor and then Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To answer your question, Mr. Suter, yes, I think this program is spot on. Direction you're going with it. I'm also very happy to hear that trees may be considered down the roads. Most places that I've been exposed to, these programs tend to be benches and trees, the most common way people want to commemorate a loved one or a family member or something like that. So I do appreciate that. One quick question though. I don't remember if it was in one of your comments or in the package. So in the presentation on the PowerPoint, it shows an example of a bench plaque. Is the intention of if the family wants to do the bench, for example, as a first layer of commemoration, is that plate be there for forever? Or is it going to be like a 10-year renewable thing? My understanding was most legacy programs I'm aware of, you buy the bench, or you contribute to the bench, the plaque is there until there's no time limit on it. Can you expand what the philosophy is at this point in terms of longevity for a bench plaque like that?
Yeah, my understanding would be, thanks for the question, would be that the plaque would remain there as long as it could. I think the struggle we have is just if it does start to fade, and then whose responsibility, as to Councilor Tellenboss's question earlier, like whose responsibility is that to replace? If you can't get a hold of the family or the person that bought that in the first place, then it likely would come back to the administration to make a decision whether to keep it or remove it and offer that option for someone else in the future. There's a variety of ways to do it. Yeah, or you just fix a term on it and then that's it. But typically you would leave them there until they're no longer what's aesthetically pleasing, I suppose, if you will, or if they're defaced quickly, you're obviously going to want to replace that right away. But I don't know that that's a big concern.
Thank you. Just one last quick comment then. Appreciate that. The program I think will be very successful. I'm aware of 3 families who are interested in doing something. I'm not contacted the city yet. They're just in the wings, in the wings, the background, waiting for some information. So you've got a couple of families that are officially in contact. I've got 3 more who want to do something when something's available. So this I think will be a very successful program, and I think it's going to be great for our community. Thank you, Mr. Suter, for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Chair McCook. Thank you, Mr. Suter, for the report. I don't see anything yet here about what other municipalities are doing, but I imagine that would come when you bring forward the naming policy. Is that your intent? Or I know that we generally look to see what else is happening in the region. So can you maybe speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, we've done a kind of a preliminary scan, and everybody does it a little bit differently. And some have just the benches, some have benches, trees, some have benches, trees, and everything in between, everything you can best possibly do. That's a problem. So I don't know if we'd follow that line, but yeah, we're definitely going to look at what's the best working one and try to emulate that as we would do with most things, Councilor Barnhart. I didn't include it here because we're not finished this work. I'm just here this evening to give you kind of an update what we're thinking we'd like to do, and just make sure we're going down the right path on this, and then we'll flesh out the rest of the details and bring it back as a fulsome package just prior to budget, so that those details will be in there. Yeah.
Just following up on that, I like this, and I think it's definitely worth doing. I don't see too much risk. I mean, of course, we have to replace benches and trees, and that's part of our ongoing work. But to have recognition and also have people, participate in the cost of that, I think all of that is a win-win, as you said. When you bring it back as well, I mean, one of my concerns is that it might be taking too long. We're trying to make it perfect, and sometimes perfect's the enemy of good. We want this to be done sooner while people are interested in doing it and benefit from it as much as we can. When you come back, though, which I know is not that far away, with the naming policy, perhaps you could mention, as you started to, the sponsorship policy and whether this is open to only individuals, or is it companies? Is it, is it meant to be for profit or not for profit only? Those kinds of things. I think that would be helpful to us as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just have a couple questions to the mayor's point. I think I agree we're on the right path. Will families have any say in the bench location as to where they would like?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Absolutely. However, Parks is working on that priority. So again, they'll look at what benches need to be replaced first for 25, for example, and then assuming they were all good and they were going to just add to the inventory, then there would be options there. And they're just wanting to kind of control those options. In the past, we let the families pick where they went, nowhere near paths. So again, now we've got benches out kind of way off from any accessible point, which then becomes a, not sure what that was, becomes a problem for maintenance and access, and then they get forgotten too. We're trying to bring this in alignment with what their maintenance plan is. So if that makes sense.
Perfect. Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So essentially there would be like a list of places that they could choose from.
Yeah, ideally we would have actually a map so that we would show where the options would be. So it's very easy for someone to go on there, see that, pick the options, fill in the information, send it through. We grab that, work order's done, it's ordered, away we go.
Perfect. Thank you. And are we concerned, or I guess I should say, like, are we prepared if we happen to get an abundance of requests? Or will we be prepared?
Well, I guess that sounds like a good thing, but if we set up the program properly, then in theory, it shouldn't be anything more than what they're doing. However, I will caution, I don't want to speak for Parks and the team. There could be a point where if you were overrun, of course, it's going to take time to get that kind of stuff done. So, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I'd just like to reiterate Councillor Penrod's point of if there is an opportunity for us to include the trees any sooner, I think it would just be beneficial. You know, we're looking at adding trees in our community as it is. So if we have the opportunity for someone to be able to commemorate someone through that, I think that would be beneficial. So the sooner we could add that, I'm sure the better. Thank you very much. Nothing else from anyone else? That's it. Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Shooter. All right, we will move on to 5.2, the development process service review update. And I believe Ms. Foley will be doing that for us. Are you coming up here? Or? Yep. All right. And Ms. Raymond. You get both.
You get both? It's a 2 for 1.
2 for 1.
She's more nicer than I am though, so you know there's that. Somebody had to be.
Your microphone is on and ready to go.
All right, well, thank you very much. Kendra Raymond, Director of Planning and Development. Here with me today is Loretta Foley, who is our strategic advisor. I was like, what title does she have? She's implementing the service review, doer of all things, and she's here to provide council with an update on how that is going so far. So I'll turn it over to Loretta.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for your attention to the service review. As Ms. Raymond mentioned, this is the primary focus of my position here is to implement the service review, which was originally brought forward through a report by KPMG back in 2022. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on the service review project, the current status of what we're doing with it right now, and then talk a little bit more in depth about how we want to look at changing our fee structure for development permitting and processes, setting service levels, and then cover financial and project risks and some community insights at the end. I'll be available for questions at the end and would also appreciate any input that committee members have. So I'll start with background. City of Beaumont is addressing the development process to align to our community needs, our vision, and our staff capacity. As you're all well aware, we are a very, very busy municipality, and with that comes with a lot of development pressure. We've also grown a lot over the past decade. We've gone from a town to a city, and a tremendously fast growing city. And our processes need to adapt as well to address all of that pressure and growth. To that end, in 2022, KPMG prepared the service review report, which was accepted by Committee of the Whole in July of 2022, which really outlined some of the key steps that needed to be taken to realign those processes and look for more efficiency in the way that we're processing applications for developments. Based on that KPMG report, our service review goals are to improve the clarity, consistency, and the efficiency of the development review process, to improve customer experience, To make the development process more able to address future changes. We know that as we continue to grow, we're going to continue to change, adapt, new kinds of products are going to come out, new kinds of development pressure are going to come. And we want to make sure that the processes that we choose are resilient to those kinds of changes, and also to calibrate staff levels to the needs of that process. So in terms of our current project status, we started actively working on the service review in August of 2023 with the hiring of an internal strategic advisor, which is myself. And work to date includes also hiring a long-range engineer who lives in the planning and development department and helps to coordinate engineering needs between those two groups, and also a lot grading coordinator who is a very, very busy person. Background process review, including mapping our existing processes and related discussions. So that included sitting down with individual staff members to find out what steps they're taking through their work to look for opportunities to improve those processes. We've done a background fee structure review, supported interim updates with the CityWorks PLL system. So that's our e-permitting software that's well underway now. The establishment of an internal service review steering committee, which we're calling the Building Beaumont team, that is made up of senior staff, just to get broad oversight on how the project is going, make sure that all of our different departments and leadership is aware of the service review project, and provides us a touch point when we are making changes to make sure that everybody understands what's happening, why it's happening, and can help support implementation. We're planning and scheduling workshops, conducting some micro workshops with staff to support improved staff productivity on a day-to-day basis, and conducting an internal development agreement workshop series and related education session that happened fairly recently. So next steps is the continuation of process workshops. So really those are dedicated working time in individual areas where we know that there's more pressure or more changes that are needed. So that includes completing the development agreement series. Next step is going to be some engagement with our developers community. And then also talking about circulation. So that's the way that we ask questions about the development process to make sure that we're getting good answers and seeking the feedback or getting the feedback that we need to make good decisions. Going through our subdivision process and looking at development permitting generally. Also setting a new fee structure and service levels, which I'll talk about in a little bit more depth here. So on the fee structure, our current fees are updated annually. We did a comprehensive review in 2015 with some limited benchmarking in 2021. And so we looked at all of that, where our fees are sitting now and what's going on in the region generally. What we identified is that fees in Beaumont are generally lower than most other regional municipalities. We have a high number of fees. There are 37 different fees for development processes, which can be confusing for applicants and also makes it a bit of a challenge for finance to keep track of what it is that we're doing and what people are paying for. And our current fee structure doesn't have a lot of incentives for quality application submissions. So what we would like to do to address those identified concerns is that ensuring that fees in the future cover our delivery service costs for new development, while also considering how homeowner permits are a different kind of fee structure and might need to be addressed in a different way. So we know that new development is a part of our community and something that we want to encourage in a way that achieves our community goals. But it is a new cost for our community. And so looking at fees that reflect that reality, I think is important. Where homeowner permits are about ensuring public safety, making sure that we're encouraging ongoing investment in the community that's here. And so looking at those fees differently is something that we want to do as a part of this fee structure moving forward. Reducing the number of different fees that we levy to improve accounting and make applying for permits easier. Talking about consistently levying penalty fees for applicants to address poor quality. We actually do have quite a number of penalty fees, but we don't apply them on a consistent basis. So moving forward, we can encourage and incentivize staff to do that reliably so that applicants know what their expectations are and that we have maybe a bit of a carrot and a stick to ensure that the applications that are coming in are complete and allow us to do a full review. We also want to bring fee proposals for the following year ahead of council budget deliberations, so that it's easier for you to make decisions about planning and development related matters in terms of cost expenditures with the full understanding of what those fees could be for the following year. And provide education to the development community and homeowners to ensure that their awareness is raised in advance of any changes that we make. On service levels, so a service level is really identifying the expected quality and speed of service that is provided to a resident or to an applicant. The benefits of setting a service level includes clear expectations. So when somebody makes an application, they know more or less how long it's going to take and what they're going to get out of that service experience. It helps us align municipal priorities to the kinds of services that we want to provide, provides reliable data for monitoring, and just gives applicants process transparency. So they know what's going to happen, they know about how long it's going to take, and they're prepared for that when they come in the door. So right now we have some minimum requirements for processing times that are mandated by the province, quality management plans related to the building process and that sort of thing. But those are minimum standards. They're not aspirational. They're not identifying where we want to be as a community in terms of service delivery. The feedback that we've had generally is that our processes are slow, which was confirmed by our research that our processes are slow. We're a very busy community, and we have a lot of applications coming in, and staff really do struggle to meet that demand. One thing that staff has indicated is a challenge to speed is that both high volume, but also many poor quality applications. Because we're not levying those penalties. And I think that in general, staff really want to help applicants. They want to help them through the door, that sometimes we help them too much. And it ends up costing us a lot of time in trying to help along poor quality applications where we could set our bar higher to say, this is what we need to review your application. And we're happy to do that when you come in with everything that we need. So that's something that we can do moving forward. So in terms of the service level recommendations, we want to identify reliable estimate timelines for the completion of main tasks in planning and development. And we may look at indexing that to seasons because we know that the summer we get more applications than we do in the winter time. So that might change. We want to consider prioritizing the speed of homeowner permits, again, because they are a different animal than our new development permits. Identifying an achievement target for timeline estimates. Calibrating staff levels, service levels, and anticipated application volumes so that when we do get those rushes of applications, we're looking for them, we're expecting them, and that we're able to staff up or to leverage resources that we have to better address those surges that we know are coming. And also regular communication of service level achievement to council and to the public. In terms of those two items, we'll be coming with more details about that to regular council meeting in Q3. So I recognize that this is very general information and maybe doesn't give you all of the numbers you might be hoping for at this point, but we wanted to seek some general input and give you an idea before we come with those hard numbers. So in terms of risks, financial risks include changing the fee structure is going to be a change for applicants, and that's something that we have to be mindful of. And changes to service levels is going to change the level of effort required by staff and maybe the things that they do as a part of their job. So that change management piece is an important one. In terms of political and reputational risks, there's always concern related to transitions in service provision, but I think in general, the development community is looking forward to changes in this area and will welcome more transparency and predictability in the services that they're asking for. And in terms of community insights, we've had some interviews with staff, other municipalities, and the development community members. We have also been involved in communication with the development community. And moving forward, we're certainly working with communications to ensure that all of those next steps that are more public facing are well communicated, that feedback is requested from the community when it's appropriate for that to happen. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions and receive feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the update. Obviously, planning and development is one of the busiest departments in our community, and for all the reasons you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, we wanted to ensure that the changes we make are beneficial and that they would make a difference to all parties involved and not just hopefully making a difference. So this work is very important. We have a couple questions. I have a few questions as well, but we'll start with Councillor Natalan-Boss and then we'll go from there.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. Some good information there. And pardon me, and setting a standard, I think would be very ideal for many reasons, obviously clear expectations. There was mention of a lot of low quality applications and drawings being submitted. I'm just wondering how come we don't enforce some of the things that we have as tools? As you had mentioned, it's not, I guess, standardized in the sense that we apply those enforcement tools consistently. So just wondering how come we don't do that to ensure, obviously, that the process is being followed.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Natalan-Boss. I think that staff are wanting to be helpful. When an application comes in, they want to support those applicants in getting through the process, and we'll do that to our own detriment. And I think, again, I've coined it as a small town hangover sometimes, that we want to help. We want to make sure that we're, not pushing people out the door or discouraging them, when really our development environment right now is very high demand, and we don't need to do that. Applicants can come in with their submissions and ensure that they're complete. So there's some culture change as it relates to that. And again, not that we don't want to be helpful for applicants, but we do also have to set those standards to ensure that our staff are working on core services as much as possible.
Just to chime in here on what Loretta said, one of the things that we noticed through the work that Loretta had done was, that they use us for their QA/QC process. Really, we're cheaper than using their engineering consultant. Our hourly rate is substantially lower than what they would pay a professional to do. And if they can continue to be like, is this good enough? No, change this, change this, change this, versus just read the standards, apply the standards, and come back when you go through that. Like, I'm going to pick on engineering for a second, and our engineering department is fabulous. But as that QA/QC process, it's not uncommon, in other municipalities, they'll go through 2 drawing reviews. We might go through 5. And we're not calibrated. There's no re-review fee for engineering. So the fee that they pay is the same if somebody got that done in 2 versus in 5, and you paid us to do, we did most of that work for you, red line that went through. And so really working through to have people have successful applications. We have very few that get pulled, very few that actually get refused. Makes our timelines longer because it's a one-on-one kind of concierge service that we provide to everybody. Because it's a pride for people, not necessarily because I think that's what they were told to do, but they're just trying to be helpful. And so sometimes it's when do you cut that off? So if you're doing a framing inspection, we could be out doing that. The framing inspection has a lot of deficiencies. We've had some builders who've taken 15 framing inspections to get through something. You kind of question that house at that point. But anyway, they're going through that and they are calling all the deficiencies. Whereas, they'll be like, well, it could take 45 minutes if it was really good, but if it's really bad, it's hours. Well, at 45 minutes, you should count that clock and say, you're not ready for this inspection, come back. So that's where we're working towards on that. But that's that low quality kind of submission, and then needing to change that with the development community and with staff.
Perfect, thank you. I just have one more question. Obviously, in terms of inspections, we got to comply with building code and what have you. But on the planning side of things, are any inspections done or site visits prior to approving, just to confirm that what on paper is exactly kind of what's being proposed at the actual area that's being developed?
Division has those.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So in terms of building inspections, they differ depending on what they're building. As it relates to a single family house, as an example, there are a minimum of 5 inspections, and it can be up to 7 or 8, depending on what they're doing, if they need to do a hydronic inspection, et cetera, et cetera. So it does depend on the context of the property. But certainly anything that would require a building permit would have at least 1 inspection. And as it relates to other aspects of the development process, like subdivisions, we do go and check on site prior to approval.
Lots of times on a development permit application, it might be a desktop review. So we have a lot of sophisticated web mapping and aerial imagery and stuff like that. We typically fly every year, so we're able to look at properties. So depending on the application is when they might go out. If there's a complaint that's been raised, or if we know that there are a lot of issues in that area, we might go take a peek at it. But it has been mostly just desktop review and then following up with other departments to see if there had been complaints or something that we need to specifically follow up on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And just one more comment. I do appreciate that in terms of the actual homeowners, keeping those fees kind of at the same cost, because again, it promotes safe development. So just want to, point that out. I think that's a good approach.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCough-Swain, then Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you for the report. Whole bunch of work into a few slides. So thanks for everything that's going on there. I mean, you spoke about this being brought forward in 22. It started much before that, and then KPMG came and gave us that update, and everyone got all excited. And so it's good to see it starting to get into process. I guess the one question I had here is you identified some of the risks, and one being the development community. I think probably just not understanding of what we're doing in that interim process, right? So maybe just help me understand what we're doing to mitigate that risk. How are we connecting with them, reaching out, kind of working with them as we get through this?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the question. In terms of the process, we're definitely looking at anywhere where we can have them be involved in a meaningful way. So in our development agreement workshops, ensuring that the development community was a part of that was something that was very important to us when we developed it. And we'll actually have a whole separate workshop just for them so that we can come in with, this is what we're thinking, this is where we're going with these things. What do you think? Does this cause challenges for you that we aren't anticipating? And how can we work together to make sure that we get what we want, what we need in order to move forward with development in a way that we can manage, but that we're also respecting the kind of needs of the development community as well. And again, as it relates to a lot of other changes, we'll certainly be communicating those in advance so that they can make preparations for anything that they're going to need to adjust as it relates to processes and that sort of thing. Yeah, and we'll also have regular industry meetings as well. Definitely something that, that we'll be conducting as well as we're making changes. Generally speaking, the feedback that we've had from the development community is, how soon? When are you going to do this? We recently actually went out to some of our builders to do some piloting of our e-permitting software so that they could try it out and see how it's going. And almost all of the feedback was, when can we use this? So I think that a lot of that feedback is going to be positive, and these are changes that the development community is really looking forward to.
Yeah, that's great. I guess my question is just in terms of so I knew that we would be doing a good job at trying to communicate, but just curious on the uptick from I'll say their side, for lack of a better term, and I'll link it to maybe I shouldn't, but I will. Like often we go out and ask the public for feedback on issues, we hear nothing, and then down the road it gets implemented, and then come back and there are challenges with that, and we're like, well, we gave you all these opportunities, you never engaged, etc. So how is the development community when we're trying to talk to them about these things? Obviously, it's deeply connected to the work that they do, but are we talking to the right people? Are there folks that we're missing? Like, how do you view that feedback?
Thank you again for the question, and I think that it's a good point that we do want to make sure that we're not just seeking feedback, but that we're seeking meaningful feedback and that we're getting representative answers. As it relates to our development agreements. Workshops coming up soon, where we chose not just to meet with now Build, but formerly UDI, but also to have a separate session for other developers to ensure that we're reaching that whole spectrum. And similarly, when we went out to do the piloting with the e-permitting software, we went through and looked for a representative sample. So we wanted some big builders, some small builders, some people just doing garages and so on. So that's something that is top of mind for us to ensure that we are getting that fulsome quality feedback and not just from, one or two people who tend to be here more often.
That's great. And just, you can plan as much as you want here and seek as much input and then, implementation comes in and then it's going to be raised up, right? So I would just ask as we get closer to this to provide a couple of key points for us, because the development community will reach out to us. Frequent flyers on Facebook will share a few of their thoughts. And so just some help around everything that we've done to help prepare into this, right? It's obviously, I think people can all agree that we're going in the right direction, trying to improve this process. And so just some key points as we get closer to how we've tried to build this out, working with the key stakeholders in this. So great work and looking forward to getting the updates there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Chair McCook, and thank you very much for the presentation and the hard work. I know this is a tough one. Glad to have you on board. Welcome.
Thank you.
The comment you were making about lots of applications coming in that maybe we have to help along the way. Is there a difference in anything that you've counted or looked at between the development industry and then residents who are doing home improvement? Is one side or the other more, or is it equally the same that there's a lack of information on both sides?
Through you, Councillor, thank you for the question. I would say that while we certainly have homeowners that need some coaching along the way to get through, the applications that are really taking the bulk of additional staff time are from the development community. So we're looking at maybe developers who have only, or builders who've only done this a couple of times. They're not as familiar with the requirements. They may not have relationships established already with contractors that they need to use and consultants. Those are the ones that are really taking up the lion's share of that additional time. While some homeowners certainly do need coaching, that's something that especially our front staff spends a lot of time doing. But I think generally it's those bigger ones that are really the challenge in terms of our timelines.
I'm glad to hear that you differentiate them somewhat, because I do think our residents, when they're doing home renovations, it may be the first time, and they're depending on the information that they think they know. But if they're like me, you don't know what you don't know until you find out that you needed to know it, and then you don't have that brochure anymore. You have to go online and look it up. So I do appreciate that. When we're looking at fees and restructuring and information, that if someone is in the business, that they ought to be held more accountable for doing it the way that they should be doing it and getting that information. So I do appreciate the direction in which you're going. And I do want to also encourage you to keep going down the road of education and awareness for everyone. I think our residents need to know as much as the developers and the builders need to know what the codes are and what's changed and why we do what we do. Sometimes the frustration comes from not knowing. So again, thank you for the work you're doing on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McCook. Again, thanks for the report. I took the opportunity to dig into the 2022 report from KPMG because I hadn't had the opportunity to see that before. And so I just wanted to start with a bit of a background piece. Correct me if I'm misreading this, but it looks like in 2020, as part of the backgrounder to that report, there was a reduction in the two departments, or one department, but the two sections, engineering and planning, of about 2.5 FTE. Does that sound correct? Yes. And based on your report tonight, we've added approximately 2 FTE. Is that right? Or am I missing something there?
Actually, thank you for the question. There has been a few more changes that have been made over in the engineering department. There is another development coordinator that exists over there as well. But the two that you're referencing are the ones most directly referenced in that report. But yes, there was a reduction and there has been an increase.
Okay, so given what you've just said, it sounds like there's been a marginal increase in overall employee time. But that's over 4 years, and referencing page 123 in tonight's PDF agenda, figure number 20 in that KPMG report, it shows sort of historic levels of permitting for, I believe, 2020, 2021, 2022. It may be actually 2019, 2021. I was trying to extrapolate what that's done, but I thought maybe the easier way to do it is just to refer back to the CAO's most recent update from last week, talking about Q1 permits, both residential and commercial, are about 250% of what they were in 2023. And I believe they were increased in 2023 over 2022. So what we're seeing is not just a year-over-year increase, but actually an almost exponential increase. So the question is, are the increases to staffing levels keeping up with the increases in demand?
Through the chair to Councillor Penrod, no, they have not been. The city as a whole has been growing exponentially, and there's lots of different areas. As we bring on new development, we're also then having contributor assets that need to be maintained for snow clearing and all sorts of other things, or the rec facilities we've brought online. So there have been a lot of challenges trying to balance that with being fiscally, I think, responsible and prudent through the budgets that we've been delivering. So that's just been the challenge, and that's where the work that Loretta is doing is working towards that consistent funding. So then we are able to actually have something that's maybe a bit more independent of that budget process, because we'll have an independent funding source to be able to actually ebb and flow. Because as you'll see right now, like there's no money right now in our planning reserve, right? We've been using that for studies and other stuff. So this would provide that. Edmonton has a similar type of reserve that they utilize that funds development related activities. So that's where we would be going with that. To answer your other question, we are approaching like 2006, 2007 kind of like levels of activity within the city of Beaumont, which, as Ms. Dargy can attest to, were some of the busiest times here. But very, very busy on all fronts right now.
Thank you. So with all that background given, I just wonder if you can help me to understand in more or less layman's terms, because this is all new to me. I'm learning everything I can as fast as I can. What's the impetus to continue this pace of growth in Beaumont? What's our why?
I think the why has been to continue to have this great community for people to live in of all ages, right? That's where we're trying to head towards, is this complete community, trying to align the development with that community vision that's looking 25, 50 years out. A lot of it has just been that other people know that Beaumont is also a really great place to be. We are going to continue to see development, not because we are the cheapest, but because Beaumont is desirable, and we will continue to be that for lots of other reasons. So I think that a lot of that is the why, really, is that Beaumont is a great place and lots of people want to be here in Beaumont. We got great schools, great trails, great amenities for your family. We are really good at that niche. We're getting a lot better. We've had a lot of growth in our seniors. The last census was over 10% in our seniors. They're coming here to be closer to their families because they're able to provide that. And it's just continuing to cycle and kind of build off of itself, right? So, you know, we're at that point where you're going to start choosing Leduc, or you're going to start choosing Beaumont, which was not a crossroads that existed before. And it's going to be really interesting with the city of Edmonton looking at how they're dealing with their growth and where that's going to push outwards into the region beyond Edmonton, because I'm going to tell you, it's them closing off South Edmonton is not going to force it to go to North Edmonton. It's going to force it to places like Spruce Grove, Leduc, Beaumont, Sherwood Park.
Yeah, thank you for your answer and for the passion that I hear behind it. I appreciate, I think part of the reason that we have the retention we do in our admin team is because we're hiring people that are passionate about what they do. And hopefully we're taking good care of you too along the way, and it's fun to work in a place that's growing and positive. I want to come back to your comment around why are we doing what we're doing, to Councillor Natellenboss's question. You know, why are we helping these kind of deficient applications so much? I learned a while ago that there's no such thing as a yes in a vacuum. A yes to one thing is almost always invariably necessarily a no to something else, right? So when we say yes to those sort of deficient applications, we're sort of saying no in a backhanded way to the folks that have done their homework ahead of time and are ready to get first get checked off the list, like the first chance they get for a review, right? As opposed to having to go 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So just something to think about, but also to my point of what's our why, if we just continue to grow as rapidly as possible, eventually it's going to be a no to, you know, we're going to see some of our service levels and quality of life indicators start to slide potentially. I hope no one mishears me. I have no interest in trying to build a gate around Beaumont. Thankfully, they let me in here in 2011. And that's really the long history of this place. So I hope we continue to be a welcoming community. It's more for me, and this goes back to what I hear out in the community too. Most folks are not interested in stopping the growth. They recognize that most of us don't go back 4 generations in this part of the country, right? So we were welcomed here. We want to continue to welcome other people. But what I hear is concern over the rate of growth and the sustainability of that, right? And so it seems to me like you've outlined some really great opportunities for us to throttle that growth in a healthy way, right? So whether it's increasing our fees for applications to make people pay a fair price for what the work they're receiving, right? If you want us to do your homework for us, then we charge you for that, right? Also, you mentioned applying consistently penalties. I think that's only fair. So just, I don't think we even need to invent new standards, but enforce the standards we have and make our rates competitive and let the market do what the market will with that.
Yep.
I feel like what I don't want to do is have Beaumont continually chasing this growth, because we know that we're developing a fairly significant infrastructure deficit long-term with the rapidity of this growth. Yeah, so I'm not saying stop, but where can we slow to a pace that's a bit more manageable for the folks that are here and for the folks that'll be paying the bills 20, 30, 40 years from now?
Think that's a really good point. There are lots of levers that you can pull with fees and, going to incentives or whatever to get that right type of development that you're looking for. We're not chasing residential development here in Beaumont, but we do have different ways that maybe we can control that growth a little bit more so that it's a bit more financially sustainable, so that we're able to keep up with those operating costs and with what makes Beaumont really great to be in. If we're going to lose that where we can't build the trails, or, you can't have your water on all that, like those aren't things that we want to do. Housing Accelerator Fund was one thing, right? And it's all in the news about really accelerating residential development. But at what point is that too much for something, right? So I think there's just lots of different things that we can do with that point and consider that, whether that's through offsite levies or other ways, or even putting in control mechanisms. In Edmonton, you have to have authorization to move forward through the area structure plan process. So there's different gates that are actually set up that maybe we don't have. And then you wouldn't have development on all fronts happening all at the same time. And then it's only in a few areas. And then we're only expanding infrastructure in this area. And then we can focus in on our upgrades that way without stressing that, trying to provide water all over the city and expand that. So lots of things.
Thank you. And just to reiterate Councillor Munkoff-Swain's point, glad to hear that we've looped in our business partners all along the way. None of this will come as any surprise to folks. In fact, I'd encourage anyone that has access through the website to download that KPMG report. Lots of times it's industry that's asking for some of this stuff because what they want is not necessarily a particular policy. They just want it to be consistent and predictable, right? That's then they can build their business model around it. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. I have a couple hopefully brief questions. So speaking to fees, so fees can sometimes be a barrier to building more and to affordability. It can impact affordability to the homeowner as they're often passed down to the homeowners. So how are we kind of balancing that and ensuring we're collecting the right amount of fees and we're in alignment with other municipalities while also making sure we're not strongly impacting affordability that will inevitably be passed down?
Thank you very much for your counsel or for your question. I think that as a part of the beginning of the fee structure review, we did do a comparative analysis of what's going on in the region. So looking at other municipalities, not just Edmonton, of course, and also comparatively sized municipalities like Okotoks, even some in BC, to see what they're charging. And right now our fees are low to very, very low. So we definitely have some room to move as it relates to what the industry is expecting related to those sort of high growth areas like housing and things like that. It is a good point that fees are always going to have an impact on that end user, and that's something that we have to be mindful of and weigh out carefully. At the same time, we also have to be mindful and weigh carefully our own resources and how much of them we want to dedicate to processing these kinds of applications without equivalent compensation. So that's something that we want to do as a part of the work that we'll be bringing forward to you when we are actually changing those fees, so that you do have that understanding of where those numbers are coming from and how they can support our processes without being a burden to future homeowners or our current homeowners who are making changes to their properties.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree that we definitely have to strike that balance. We don't want to be very, very low. And that could be partially why we're seeing some of the growth as well. But definitely finding that balance is important. And I appreciate you guys bringing forward that information. It appears that a lot of the engagement around this, and I know obviously our developers and stuff are the ones mostly impacted by these processes, but have we looked at or received any feedback from kind of some more of the regular permits and stuff like that? So to Councillor Barnhart's point, maybe some of the basement people who are doing basement renos or some of those more kind of run-of-the-mill type development permits, deck permits, stuff like that.
Thank you for the question. To date, we haven't had any specific feedback or specific outreach for those particular groups outside of involvement in the e-permitting system, where we did have them do some piloting for us. But certainly as we move forward, particularly when it relates to things like fees and service levels, that feedback will be very important and something that we'll consider as a part of our communications planning.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I can imagine that that's probably potentially where we would see any kind of, I guess, friction would maybe be, how long it's taking and or are people understanding the process and understanding what's required when they hand in those permits and stuff like that. So hopefully we'll get some feedback around that. But that's kind of all I have as other questions were answered. So nobody else has any other questions? I think that's it. And thank you very much. Obviously, very important work as it impacts a variety of areas in our city. So we definitely appreciate the work that you guys are doing.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right. All right, we will keep rolling here to our next presentation. 5.3, which is the proposed responsible pet ownership bylaw. We have Mr. Melvin and Mr. Christensen with us this evening. You're ready to go, your mic's on and off you go.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of council. This evening, introduce myself for the folks watching at home. Chief Melvin, Director of Protective Services. I'm also here with Sergeant Christensen, who's our Supervisor of Municipal Enforcement. This evening, we're going to give you the update on the draft for the Responsible Pet Ownership Bylaw. Within your package, you would have had the existing bylaw from 2015, the draft bylaw for 2024. Our comparison that LLS does for the old bylaw compared to the recommended new one. And then also our online survey public education that we did back in January. Now, as you're well aware, within the department, we've been updating our bylaws for the past several years, focusing in around community safety. Community standards bylaw was done, traffic safety bylaw, we did the emergency management, and now we're doing the responsible pet ownership bylaw. New name, obviously the old existing terminology used to be animal control, but that bylaw was in effect from 2015 and 2024. We've been working on this bylaw since last fall within municipal enforcement, protective services, planning and development, legal and ledge, and our comms team. And also doing comparators to see what other agencies around us are doing. So some of the things within the bylaw itself, obviously we did the community engagement, seeing the significant responses, which was good because we knew it was going to be a hot topic, I guess, just around pets and strays and what we're doing and urban hens and chickens and a whole bunch of other things. So we wanted to make sure that we looked at the bylaw with a wide scope to see if we can get something that's very good for the city. Some of the things that to highlight for councils, obviously the urban agriculture. Backyard chickens and hens and the bees and all those things. Right now, this bylaw does not have that stuff in it, but can easily be changed in the event that the city runs a pilot project with the CO's approval, so that can easily be done. Vicious animals, obviously there's new provisions in there. Pet licensing, we've updated that and just try to give you a bit what that program kind of costs. There's not really a really revenue generator, but it is a good resource for our officers when they're trying to track down somebody's pet that has gone stray. Having it registered is very easy for them. And then also service animals. We want to make sure that we capture that as a service animals program within the province gets expanded and members with service dogs. So some of the next steps, obviously, we're presenting this to the committee of the whole, as I've done many times before, bring you the draft, let council go through it, ask us the questions. If there are no questions or if there needs to be tweaks, we would then make the adjustments and then bring the bylaw back to council, most likely before the summer break for first, second, and third reading. The financial risk, we covered everything within the operational budget. We had this plan for as part of our normal bylaws. And then the big piece around the public engagement, there was lots of questions there. The summary is attached on what some of the concerns that people had. Sergeant Christian will be able to answer hopefully all of your questions on the specifics of the challenges when it comes to this bylaw and some of the changes that they've made and how they're able to enforce them. So at this time, I'll turn it over to the chair and council for questions on either the existing bylaw, the draft bylaw, the comparison, or even the public engagement.
Thank you. All right, does anyone have any questions? To start off with, we have Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Chair McCook. Thank you for the work to update, and obviously also I imagine, maybe I'm assuming incorrectly, legal legislative services probably helps with some of the crossing of Ts and dotting of Is. And so thank you to them for their work on this. Looks like solid work to me. Glad to see there was lots of public engagement and that seems like a pretty high number to me as far as the respondents to the survey. So I'd like to give a little bit of feedback and ask some questions. With respect to questions, first one I had was love to see the addition to accommodate folks with service animals. Just wonder who was consulted or did we pull that policy from another jurisdiction? I'm aware that sometimes the way these policies are implemented can actually create sort of accidental hurdles that the folks we're trying to accommodate then have to try to jump through, right? So just trying to get an idea of where we came up with this policy from.
Great question. Through the chair to Councillor Penrod. So when I wrote this bylaw, I went through all the municipalities in pretty much northern Alberta as well as central Alberta. It was pretty much standard that every bylaw for responsible pet ownership had that in there. Service dogs, of course, have to be approved through the provincial act and would be able to provide us with that information before we could actually allow it to be no fee.
Thank you. So I can't find it right now in front of me. I should have written the page number down, but I think the language in the bylaw is a little vague, just basically says must show the CAO to the CAO's confidence or whatever that it's a legitimate service dog or whatever, right? So thank you though. I'm glad to hear that we're kind of in line with what other folks are doing there. Just a small bit of feedback. We have sort of I hope we don't have a lot of these animals, but for dogs that are animals that are deemed vicious and at home, there's a requirement that they post a particular sign on their property. Yeah, and that sign comes with an image on it. I'm just wondering if we could do without the image or make the image non-breed specific. I don't want to get a letter from the German Shepherd Kennel Club. I think that's a German Shepherd, but I could be wrong. Obviously, not every dog of that breed is dangerous and certainly not vicious. So if we could take that under advisement.
Thank you for that input.
And then if I could pose the question of the hour from Beaumont Talks. I see in our prohibited animals section, I'm looking at, I know we get this repeated a couple times, but I'm looking at 198 in tonight's agenda, page 198 of 233. It's Schedule C, prohibited animals. And point 2, follow with me, all dogs other than domesticated dogs, including but not limited to wolf, and second is coyote. So obviously lots of conversation in the community about, I don't think they're pets unless anyone wants to fess up to them being theirs, in which case they're off leash and we should just apprehend them. But so I wonder if you could just inform us, including myself, but members of the public, what different regulations do we have to follow provincially, maybe even federally, with regards to wildlife?
Right.
And how that intersects here?
Sure. That's a great question through the chair to yourself. So it's basically what this is saying, you can't have it as a pet. Now, as for coyotes, which is over the last week has been a big topic, that's two-tier. One is that if the animal is the coyote, and we'll use that, is aggressive or bites or attacks or is sick or can't move, then that would be a fish and wildlife issue. Otherwise, it becomes a municipality issue, but there's nothing that we can deal with that. Basically, other municipalities, I spent this morning, pulling all the other agencies in the area, how they deal with them. Essentially, it's pretty much signage, communication, if we do have these incidences, then we do need to contact the Fish and Wildlife. I've been in conversation with them as well today in regards to that as well. So we're following everything that we can. One of our casual officers actually works as a park ranger for the city of Edmonton. So I reached out to him and got what they do, pretty much what is being advertised throughout all of our social media.
Okay, thank you.
That's it. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Monkoff-Swain.
Just thank you very briefly and thanks for, I won't make my Cardi joke that I was going to, so thanks for going into that. Just the one question I have, I've had a few residents kind of speak a little bit about animal, dogs in this case, being on leash on their own property. And so you talk about, in here you talk about areas where animals can be off leash, and obviously the off leash park, etc. But I can, and if it's in here, I apologize. But if a dog has their owner on their driveway, right, which is their own private property, in this bylaw, does that dog need to be on leash?
Great question through the chair to yourself. No, they don't have to be on a leash. They just have to be under care and control. So basically, if your dog is on the deck or on the deck, front deck, or on the driveway, someone walks by, you have to ensure that that dog is not going to chase after that person or run off onto the street or that type of stuff. So you have to have care and control.
Okay.
Which exact section I would have to look it up.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just I appreciate that. And sorry for the drilled down question. It's come up twice in the last week somehow. And so I didn't know the answer, and instead of me going back to 2015, I figured I'd just wait and ask you. So thank you. But generally, really good update here. I don't have any major issues at all. The comparison's great. The renaming of the bylaw makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah, looking forward to seeing this come back. So I know it's been a ton of work to compare and contrast everything into it, but looking forward to seeing this come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. They may be getting a little into the nitty gritty, so just stop me if they do. Under prohibited, we have they're prohibited from being in a playground and sports field. So to clarify, no dogs in playgrounds, even on leash. Okay. Unattended animals. Do we need to clarify what suitable ventilation means? I just think, I hate that we would have to, but we've all seen it, 30 degrees outside and someone's cracked the window this much and their dog's sitting in the car. So would they be able to come back and say, oh, that's suitable ventilation?
Great question, Madam Chair. It becomes very objective when we have to make those decisions. Again, we would have to look at the welfare of the animal. And if we would go to the next step of having to issue a violation or whatever, we may have to look at a justice to be able to declare that, yes, that was enough ventilation or not, it wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be
it's going to be a bit of an officer discretion and depending on the situation and everything that's going on.
Okay, thank you. And then failed to remove feces. We have some specifics like tennis courts, sport fields and stuff like that. Should we also include sidewalks and paths? Or should it just be more broad and say failure to remove feces,
that was my
period?
understanding. I would have to actually look up the section.
Okay.
Give me a second. I just
Okay.
look that up.
Just perhaps a consideration. I know that that's become an issue in our community that people are not doing enough of that. And so it obviously then impacts people's, wellness and ability to enjoy the paths and whatnot, free of dog poop. So I don't know, potentially we just need to consider that it's just failure to remove feces from public places, grounds, I don't know. And then just for clarity's sake, in regards to that and the fine that comes with it, does someone need to be caught doing it in real time by an officer. So for example, many people have cameras nowadays. So if they come and say, you know, I have a camera and I caught my neighbor and their dog and they didn't remove it and I have a picture and I know that it's my neighbor. Are you able to go speak to that neighbor or would you, or is it just, no, we have to see it happen in real time?
No, so great question. We could use their evidence, it's their evidence. So we would just be the charging officer. We would, if they wanted to pursue charges, then we would follow through with that process, just like anything else that we would do. If we wrote a ticket for speeding or anything else, they would just become the witness and we would take up their information and issue a violation or notice or give them a stern talking to, whatever we require or whatever they would like to proceed with.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that clarity. I think, yeah, it's just become a larger issue in our community, and I think the more people know about what they're able to do as well, the better. But yes, appreciate all the work that's gone into this and all the changes, and happy to see some of the changes around some of the investigative stuff and regarding vicious dogs and whatnot as well. That I'm sure will be beneficial given some of the recent events in other communities, and really appreciate the name change as well. I think it better reflects the intention of the bylaw as well. So that's great. I've lit up again, so we have some additional questions. So you're not done yet. So we have Councillor Natellenbos, Councillor Barnhart, then Councillor Penrod, Councillor Natellenbos.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a quick question in regards to the addition. Sorry, there's a few documents here. For the urban agriculture, obviously this is a discussion that's been slightly ongoing, and I'm just wondering why we've added additional wording to be able to kind of flip the switch so that we can have the birds and the bees in the backyards kind of thing. As opposed to us going through the conversation come time and adjusting the bylaw if we feel that it's necessary. How come we're adding that quick out so that we can adjust should, I guess, the CAO decide to go ahead with it?
I think it's a great question through the chair to yourself. So why we went with this way is that we've been in discussions with the long-term planners in the agriculture, and they are not ready to get to that spot yet. So with us being able to put this into the bylaw now to say, can't have them unless there's another process, which would be a new bylaw, because it would be covered under a different bylaw than the responsible pet ownership.
Okay, perfect. So I guess just looking for clarity, because I believe the wording here says, unless authorized by the CAO in writing, no person shall keep the birds, the bees, the snakes. So just a little clarity, we would have to go through an additional bylaw process, or it's as simple as the CAO in writing suggesting that these are now allowable?
Yeah. That's a great question. It's not covered in this bylaw, and it just allows the other bylaw to take place of that. So then the CAO would be responsible to say, yeah, we're going to allow birds and bees and that type of stuff, chickens, through the new bylaw. Then this would just make this a moot point. That's how LLS decided to, or wanted us to word this for this bylaw. We wouldn't be coming back, sorry, wouldn't be coming back to adjust this bylaw. It would just be, the new bylaw would be taking the place for the urban agriculture.
I'm going to add Ms. Dargy may be able to add some color here.
Thanks for that. Just to expand on what Eric is saying, we worded it that way because the urban agriculture project hasn't advanced. This will allow, if they want to do a pilot program, that we don't actually have to come back, change the bylaw to implement it. The CAO can authorize the program and we could do a pilot program. If council then decided they wanted to implement it on a continuous basis, then we would come back and revise the bylaw and implement that on a continuous basis. But it would just allow pilot programs or one-off situations until that time.
Perfect, thank you. So just again, for clarity, council would have no say in this continuing if they go ahead with the pilot program?
That I'm going to now look to planning, but I believe that's part of the urban agriculture master plan, is to implement urban agriculture projects, but I don't recall the plan itself.
Yes, so through to Ms. Dargy's comments there, one of the action items is to further investigate the technical requirements of urban chickens and whatnot, making sure that people are actually capable of ownership of chickens in an urban environment and bees. And that is work that needs to be done. As far as there's the implementation plan that I believe just came to council, was that last week, was part of that action. That's one of the 4 priority items that we are going to be investigating this year. As for what the requirements around that are and whether or not that will be coming back to council and when you're going to see that, I actually need to talk to Mr. Wong to get more specifics on that. So I will follow up with you with council on that.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Raymond. So I guess just my concern is if it is a hot topic in terms of some people are for it, some people are against it. So I just think it warrants a little more discussion than pushing it through. So that's my concern with adding that line there. But yeah, I'll leave that with you guys and can discuss it further, I guess, at reading.
Thank you. And Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Chair McCook. There's a lot in here, and I think the more I read it, the more questions I find. But I'm curious to know why we've narrowed animal. Why did we have to do that? I'm just a little bit confused by animal being just cats and dogs for the purpose of this bylaw. And then we go on to say what animals are not allowed. It confuses me when I read that. So I'm just wondering, what's the thinking behind that? I'm sure you have a really good reason for it. And I want to get my head around it so that I can explain it to other people.
Great question through the chair to Councillor Barnhart. Again, we pulled all the bylaws in the area. They were all set up with having it set up as animals and livestock and divided it up that way. So it was basically a industry standard, I guess we'll call it, that everybody else was writing their bylaws and definitions were rated on that.
Okay, and then what I see missing, but maybe I just didn't find it yet. Someone could have a pet African gray parrot. And I didn't see that as excluded, but I also don't see it here. So are there still some things that are falling outside? People can have as many birds as they want, as long as they're not of those ostriches and things like that. I'm glad we can't have elephants, and that's what's important.
Great, good question through the chair to Councillor Barnhart. I would believe that they are probably in the restricted. I'd have to double check, but it would fall under the prohibited. Possibly, I'd have to look at the definition of what type of bird that is. That's a question that hasn't been presented to me, so I'd have to review and see where we sit.
I'd appreciate if you'd look, because I do know people that, not necessarily do I know of any in Beaumont, but I do know people that have them and have had that they live to be 80 years old.
Yeah.
So I think that would be one to maybe, if we're going to allow it, it's going to be here for a long time. Yep. So, and that's okay. I'm okay with birds, but I know some people are not. So I just wanted to check that. And yeah, I think lizards was the other one. And cats, of course, that question comes up all the time. It's really hard to enforce. So I don't know if you have any magic plans for that, but again, neighbors usually, if they're going to complain about something, it might be that the cat is in their garden, but how, other than a cat trap, there's no other way, and taking pictures of things like that. But so I don't know if you want to add anything to that whole area.
Yeah, great question through the chair to Councillor Barnhart. Absolutely, we follow up on all those complaints all the time. We work with the residents. We do offer the cat trap program, which is detailed in here as well. We try to work with neighbors to try to resolve those issues. Again, Beaumont does require cats to be registered. So we do work with the residents that have these cats and try to make sure that they either keeping them indoors or keeping them on a leash in the backyard so that they stay in their yard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for bringing this to us.
All right, it looks like that's it. No more questions left. And so once again, appreciate you guys coming forward with this, and thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving along. Next thing, adjournment. So easy enough. We will adjourn the meeting at 6:35. Thank you very much.